When he turned his back from shoulder to shoulder, it looked like as wide as the tailgate of a truck.
And just darkness, literal darkness, just came like all over, just all over me except where I was standing.
This thing let out the most blood-curdling, mind-blowing, spine-tingling scream that you've ever heard in your life, and it cut through me like a knife.
And I knew that they were going to take me. I just knew it. And then the next thing I can remember is being levitated.
Well, when I look in there, I see two big eyes staring back at me.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night.
Hey there, believers. Got a good show for you today. I've been running around like crazy. I got here at the buzzer. I told Pete we'd do this interview at 2, this session. It's 2. It's like it is time to roll. I just now sent him the invite link. Sorry about that, Pete, for keeping you waiting, buddy. I forgot. My daughter has a job, so I had to take her to work, drop her off. She's not driving the Jeep. Hey guys, got a great episode for you today. Tons of stuff going on. Pete, Weird West Texas 4. This is the final installment of the Pete saga. My man. Everybody's come to love him. I love Pete. This is the last time we're going to be doing, the Weird West Texas shows. But I'm sure me and Pete will keep in touch, for a long, long time to come. We've become buddies. He's going to come on the show. He's going to wrap up his paranormal experiences, the unexplained. It's going to be a blessed show. So I look forward to that. Guys, if you haven't already, please go to thebumppodcast.com. Scroll down on the homepage to the believers only section. Hit let's go. Sign up to be a member on the website. I'm trying to get away from Patreon. I'm trying to make this a more independent thing. It's been a one-man band since the beginning. I've given it to God, so now I'm just like a steward for the show. I feel comfortable that way. I feel like the more we can keep in-house, the better. So I'm trying to get away from Patreon, and I know I have some subscribers on there that contribute a lot more financially than what I'm asking for the membership on the website. But you can always donate what you want to if you feel like giving more. It's awesome. You can do that through Anchor. You can do that probably on the show itself. But it's $1.75 a week to join. Go check that out while I bring Pete on the show. How it goes.
Okay. Hey, Bo, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. You ready for Wild West Texas Volume 4?
Yes, sir. I'm just about out of stories, but since I love to talk, I'm sure there'll be enough content for a full episode. I haven't heard part 3 yet, so I can't remember what corrections I'd made to our second interview.
Yes.
But just in case it's not on there, the Native American lady that does Bigfoot research that's at the Four Corners area.
Yep.
I kept calling her Linda Harris, and her name's Brenda Harris.
Got it.
Okay. And so I'm not sure if that's on part 3 or not, but I just want to make sure I clarified it.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then something that I got to thinking about our last interview, or no, this was actually off of part two also. The do you remember my two canine guys?
Yeah.
They were coming back and they saw something.
Yep.
The one thing I forgot to add in that interview is my friend Lewis, the lead officer, said his dog had been asleep in the back in the kennel. And right when this happened, his dog had jumped up and just started barking, and they spin around in circles because they can't get out.
Right.
So what they do is they spin in circles and bark. And he said that dog went ape.
Wow.
And I forgot to mention that part on episode 2.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Something I got to thinking about that I also need to correct off of episode 3, which as of this recording hasn't aired yet.
Right.
But when I talked about that, I told you me and one other sergeant were the head guys that weekend when the shooting happened.
Right.
And oh, by the way, this upcoming September the 8th will be 15 years.
I'm so sorry, Pete.
Yeah. Thank you. I got to thinking about that, and I had told it to you wrong. I told you that sergeant and the other officer were going to go recover Scott's body.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to lay cover fire, and I told you I didn't think that was a good idea, but I was going to go along with it. And that officer, which was one of his best friends, one of Scott's best friends. Of course, we're all friends. We all work together, but one of the guys that hung out with him, that's what I mean.
Right.
And he had told us that Scott was gone and that wasn't a good idea because we would be in the line of fire.
Right.
Well, everything I got to thinking about it, and there's something I didn't tell you quite right. It was going to be that other sergeant and me that was going to retrieve Scott's body, and that other officer was going to be the one laying the cover fire. So it wasn't me laying cover fire; it was going to be him.
Right.
That was supposed to cover us. And the other thing I forgot to tell you, and I didn't find this out till weeks later, but probably 3 or 4 weeks after the shooting. During all this, while all this was going on, and all it was chaos. Scott's phone kept ringing in his pocket, and he got tired of that officer that I'm telling you about.
Yeah.
He got tired of hearing that phone ring in his pocket. And it was the University of Texas fight song is what it was, because he's a big Longhorns fan. And so what he did is he crawled over from where he was at the corner of the house, took the phone out of his pocket, and he checked, and he was deceased.
Oh.
I forgot to tell you that. So it wasn't just a deal where he said, oh, he's gone, and then we just like, okay, well, never mind. No, he actually had walked over and touched him.
Right.
I guess I checked his pulse. I don't know, but he did retrieve his phone, and then he silenced it. And then he went back to where he was at the side of the house. But I didn't find out about that till 3 or 4 weeks later. The only thing I knew at the time was that he told us that wasn't a good idea and that Scott was gone.
Right.
And I find out later that he had actually retrieved the phone and checked it. So I forgot to mention that last time we talked.
Well, that's all right, Pete. That's such a touching story. It's such a heartbreaking story. And I again, I just want to thank you from me to you, man. Thank you for sharing that with me. You know, that's a part of your life. And I don't know. I feel closer to you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Bo, I appreciate you. I'll tell you one other thing that I don't believe I brought up during that, related to this in a way, during that last interview. There was an incident that had happened at our police department building down in the basement. We have this independent contract crew that comes in with people that clean the building custodial services.
Right.
A lot of them that they don't even speak English, but a lot of the officers that are bilingual, we are friendly with them and communicate with them. And there was one cleaning lady that was assigned the night shift, the middle of the night. And one of our, there was a sergeant that has an office down in the basement in the back corner. And he hadn't seen her in a while. And when he finally saw her, he said, "Oh, you're on day shift now?" And this whole conversation took place in Spanish, but she said, yeah, what had happened is one night she was down there in the basement. She was mopping. She was in the hallway, and the locker rooms are downstairs. You have the men's locker room that has showers, toilets, and stuff. In the middle, you have a small weight room. And then on the other side of that weight room is the women's locker room. Well, she was in the hallway and was mopping when all of a sudden she hears a male wailing, just crying real loud, real sad. And this was coming from the men's locker room.
Yeah.
Well, she kept mopping and at first tried to kind of ignore it. Thought, none of my business, whatever. And finally, she just got so concerned. She thought, I'm just going to go in there and check on him. So she went into the men's locker room part. She knocked, to warn anybody I'm coming in. Anybody there? She checked that entire men's locker room, the showers and the toilet, and there was no one down there.
Wow.
So after that, she refused to work nights and refused to clean the basement. All the stuff down in the basement.
Mm.
And I don't know that that's related to what happened or not, but it did happen afterwards. And that happened maybe, I don't know, it was months later.
Right.
8 months, 10 months, something like that.
Wow.
But yeah, I don't think I had brought that up either.
No, I hadn't heard that one. That's, I've heard stuff like this that have come out of like fire stations, that you'll see people that are still, ready to answer the call, you hear about police stations being haunted and stuff like that, but it's all just like a cool story until it's made personal like this, man. And then it really hits home that that's the stress of the job, and that's people's loved ones, that are in mourning and not moving forward, or however it works.
Yeah. So something that I brought up on the very first episode, but didn't go into the actual stories because we ran out of time, is some of the stuff that happened to my wife, her ghost stories. I told you some of her dad's stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Well, some of the stuff that happened to her is the house that she grew up in West Odessa. Also had a lot of issues, kind of like the house I grew up in. And some of the stories that she tells about that is one time when she was in high school, she got back home before everyone else. And she's got 3 sisters and a brother. And so they she got home and went to use the bathroom. And then all of a sudden she heard the front door open, heard footsteps come in, and something bumped the coffee table in the living room to where her mom had trinkets or something on there, and they rattled.
Mm.
And then the footsteps walked up to and stood in the hallway outside the bathroom that she was in. So she called out thinking it was one of her siblings or parents, and no one replied. So then she got real scared and thought, oh no, somebody broke in. And of course, she finished her business and went out there to check and stuff. And there was no one home. There was no one in the driveway and nobody in the house.
Wow.
Yeah. Another one she tells is she had this, she used to sleep in this, one of those old fashioned metal beds that have the bars on them.
Yep.
Well, there was a lady that was friends with her mom that really always wanted that bed. And are you still there?
Yep. I'm right here.
Oh, okay. Um, that lady wanted the bed real bad, so she offered to trade a wooden bed for it. And so they agreed to do it. And my wife said that at night, that bed would move, it would shake. And
Really?
yeah, and it would wake her up out of her sleep. And then at first she thought, well, maybe it's my imagination. So my wife said what she did is she hung a little necklace off the corner of it on the headboard
Yeah.
just to test this theory out. And after that, when the bed would rattle, that little necklace would be tapping the headboard where it would be swaying.
Mm-mm.
So here's the funny part. She told her parents about it, and they didn't believe her.
Of course.
So then what ended up happening is her older brother, who's only a year older than her, he ended up sleeping in that bed one night. And the same thing happened to him. It started moving and woke him up. And of course, he got scared, got up out of the bed, and slept on the couch after that. But what was funny is she said that once her brother told the parents what had happened, her parents believed the brother. They just didn't believe her.
Oh, yeah, man. That's probably why she wanted rid of the bed to begin with.
You know what? I never even thought about that, but you're probably right.
She was like, here, trade me this old haunted bed for a good one.
Yeah. Well, here's another story that they told is one time her aunt and uncle came to visit. They had been in town. I don't remember if it was a quinceañera or a wedding or something like that. And so after everyone's still at the ballroom celebrating, and since they're from out of town, they were from Levelland, Texas, and they were going to crash out at my in-laws' house. And so the aunt and uncle pulled up first, and they heard all kinds of screaming going on inside the house. They heard dishes breaking and glass shattering. And they thought, so what they ended up doing is that her uncle called my wife's dad and said, you better call the cops. Sounds like someone broke into your house. So of course he didn't call the cops. They pulled up shortly after because they were all headed that way anyway. And they go in and check the house, and everything was in place. There wasn't anything broken. And the aunt and uncle swore they heard screaming and like a big argument or fight going on and stuff breaking. And I think that's about it as far as at her house. And then another thing that happened to her, her senior year of high school, she would go to school the first half of the day, and then they had a program where you would work the second half of the day.
All right.
And she worked at for the tax collector assessor downtown. It's a separate county courthouse building from the main courthouse.
All right.
It's where you get your vehicle tags and property tax stuff. Well, she said it was a Friday afternoon. It was almost time to get off. It was after 4. So she said she got caught up on her work and was kind of wandering the hallways. And then she went in the bathroom to kill time, the women's bathroom. And she said while she was sitting there, she heard a woman walks in, and you could tell she was wearing high heels. So what she did is she peeked under the stall as the footsteps were going by, and she said whoever this woman was wearing red high heel shoes. And she went a couple of stalls over and went in, And then after that, you couldn't hear anything. So she finished up her business again, and she still didn't hear anyone in there.
Right.
And she noticed that the stall doors were cracked open. So after she washed her hands and nobody was in there, and she couldn't hear anything. She didn't hear anybody sitting there or anything. So curiosity got the best of her, and she went over there and started checking those stalls. And there wasn't anybody in there. She never heard anyone walk out or leave, and
Wow.
the footsteps went in one direction, and that was it. And there was no one in there but her.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's
But
wild. Had there been any other reports of stuff in the building?
not that she had never heard of any reports, and that's the only incident that happened to her while she was there.
Wow.
But that building originally was before Odessa got one of the big major malls.
Uh-huh.
Back then, Sears and Roebuck was that building. Like, it was an independent building in town. It was that the whole building was Sears and Roebuck.
Gotcha.
And then once they built the mall, of course, Sears is always one of the anchor stores in a mall.
Yep.
So once they moved over to the actual mall, well, the county ended up buying that building, and that's where they put the tax assessor and all that.
So who knows? There could have been something lingering.
Yeah. And who knows for how long or what.
Wow.
But last night I was thinking about all the stuff I was going to tell you about, and I thought about something that happened to me in high school. That a lot of times I hate listening to the shows where people just talk about these vivid dreams or lucid dreams, and because to me it's still just talking about dreams. I'd rather hear about actual things that happen while you're awake.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay, well, I want to tell you one about a dream I had, but you'll see why I'm telling you. I did have a dream in high school. One night I dreamed that I was driving down a highway or a freeway.
Right.
There was overpasses, and those big green signs that have the white letters that are reflective and the white outline, the trim.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they tell you like whatever the next town or the next exit is, if you're going to go to that town, whatever.
Yep.
Well, I saw one that it was what I thought was Spokane, which Spokane, Washington, right?
Right.
In my mind, I'm driving and I see that sign. Anyway, I wake up. I thought that was strange, right? Because why would I dream about that? I pretty much, I'm from West Texas. I have zero ties to the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
So why am I dreaming this sign on the highway and I'm driving? Oh, and it was at nighttime, right? But it was lit up. The signs were lit up with lights, but it was nighttime driving on the highway. And I just woke up thinking, man, that is so strange. Why would I dream that town or that city, whatever,
Right.
of all things? And then, so I went on to school, and I was unusual for a high school kid. And I'll tell you why. I used to read the newspaper, all the sections, right?
Yeah.
That's unusual for a high school kid in itself.
Yeah, it is.
But since I was on the school newspaper staff and the yearbook staff, it was the same teacher. I had access to all kinds of magazines, so I would regularly read Time, Newsweek, and U.S. News and World Report. And then the other thing I would do is, after I'd get home from school, I would watch the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Right.
Any one of those things is unusual for a high school kid, much less. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So that day, I get home that evening, and I'm watching that CBS Evening News, and I find out that somebody had tampered with Tylenol in Spokane, Washington.
Really?
And yeah, and like 7 or 8 people died or something like that.
Mm.
They poisoned them somehow. That's when after that incident happens, when you started getting your tamper-proof bottles with the seals and all that.
Right. Right.
Before then, you could just, I guess, unscrew the lid, and I think maybe it might have just had cotton in it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But what was funny is when I saw the sign, in my mind it said Spokane, Washington, and then come to find out it's pronounced Spokane. But I had dreamed that night, and then by the following afternoon after school, after I'd woke up, that had happened over there.
Well,
Yeah,
how
I
does
don't
that
know.
how does
Yeah,
that happen, Pete?
I don't know. So I was thinking about it last night, and I was thinking, what would be the significance of me seeing that? Now, was I seeing it through the eyes of the person that tampered with it, or was it because all that happened? And I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't. I had no connection to that side of the country.
Right.
There was no reason for me to dream that.
You know, I ask if you have any idea why that stuff happens because my best friend in the world sent me a message last night. From the time we're recording this, this is early August. He sent me a message last night and told me that he was starting to freak out. He's a hardcore skeptic of pretty much everything.
Right.
But he had these same kind of synchronicities happening to him, like right now. He's had about 4 or 5 different events go on like this that are very similar to what you're talking about. I'll give a couple examples. He don't even listen to this show. Like we're besties, but he has no part in anything paranormal or unexplained.
Right.
But he said that he was sitting there thinking about his grandmother who had passed over the weekend, and she passed a while back, but he had her on his mind, and he remembered how she loved to snack on Nutter Butters,
Right.
and he said that just got him thinking. He hadn't seen those those little cookies or whatever in forever. He said it's probably been 20 years since he's seen a Nutter Butter. Well, that evening, he's on the phone with a buddy of ours that lives out in California, and his friend says, "Hold on a minute, I'm gonna go in the kitchen and grab some Nutter Butters." It's like, what? It sounds like really insignificant, but of all things, why was that on his mind that day? And then his friend talked about it that evening. And another very similar thing happened with a groundhog. We're all vets, so we got friends all over the country, and he had a buddy talking about groundhogs being called whistle pigs, and it was just weird to him. He had never heard that before.
Right.
Well, then that afternoon, which was yesterday, a groundhog runs across his backyard, and he lives in the middle of the suburbs in Lansing, Michigan.
Wow.
but there's this groundhog in his backyard right after him and his buddy talk about these whistle pigs. So it makes me wonder, why in the world does this stuff happen? Why do we get these little glimpses, these synchronicities? It's weird.
Yeah, that's strange. I don't know. Yeah, what's funny is I hadn't thought about that dream and the stuff with the Tylenol in years.
Yeah.
Just that last night I was thinking about what all I was going to talk to you about, and I remembered that.
It's strange how things recur like that.
Yeah, and I had told you about my wife's premonition the night of the shooting, right?
Yes.
So these dreams are not enough to prevent anything from happening, but they end up taking on a significance after the fact,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me tell you a couple of Bigfoot stuff. I know I'd already told you some of the stuff that happened at our deer camp in Brownwood.
Oh yeah.
Well, do you remember that trip I told you we took a bucket list trip that was 3 weeks? We visited 9 Western U.S. states.
I believe I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? That's it's because we were on that trip when we ran across that possessed guy in Farmington, New Mexico. That's why it's mentioned.
Yes. At that bridge. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was that trip. It was a 3-week trip. Well, I could tell you something we did was we didn't make reservations anywhere ahead of time because we didn't know where we were going to be. We decided we would look at the map and head somewhere,
Right.
and we would spend one night camping and then one night in a hotel. And we would stagger it that way. That way we could get cleaned up and the kids had Wi-Fi and a pool. But my wife and I preferred because we were tent camping. So she and I preferred the camping and they preferred the hotel. So we would stagger it.
Right.
I'll tell you what was interesting is it was a 21-day trip. Out of those 21 days without reservations, only 3 times were we not able to get a room.
Really?
Yeah, 3 times out of 21.
Wow.
Or not really 21 because only half of it was. But what happened is we left Odessa and went northwest towards New Mexico. And one of the nights we could not get a room was the very first night. So it already wasn't looking good. But
Yeah, got off to a great start.
Yeah, the rest of the trip went better than that though. But we were in Santa Fe, New Mexico, right? All the hotels were booked. We were showing up at some randomly. We were calling some. Everyone was booked out. So then we found out that there's at the Santa Fe National Forest, there's a national park campground. So we had all our camping stuff. So we said, well, we'll go try and find a spot up there, right?
All right.
So we drive up there and come to find out there was only like 38 spots and they were all filled. So what we ended up doing is we camped outside of the national park, just off the road, outside of the campground area.
Yeah.
And there was another car that was parked across the road from us. And we never saw them get out or put up a tent. I think they just ended up sleeping in the car. So by the time we were exhausted at this point, this is the first night of this trip. It's about 1:20 in the morning. We pitched that tent up. Luckily, it was one of those tents you could put up real quick and take down real quick. So, and we did this the rest of the trip too. My wife would sleep at one end, and then she had my young son, my 6-year-old son, beside her, and then our 17-year-old daughter was in the middle, and then it was my 8-year-old son next to me, and then I was on the other end. And we decided to do that so that way the parents would be on both ends.
All right.
And of course, I had told you before we were heavily armed. We had a 12 gauge. Did I tell you that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had double aught buck and slug shots.
Good.
Staggered in it. And we had a 357 Magnum revolver. And we had a 40 Sig.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy.
Yeah, which the 40 Sig was actually my duty weapon.
Right.
And so they fell asleep pretty quick, right? And I'm still kind of wound up, and I'm laying there and I'm trying to fall asleep. I don't like the idea that we're camped off in the woods off the side of the road. And my truck was probably about 30 or 40 feet away from us. You could still see it. It was within view.
All right.
And I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but we were in a Ford F-250 turbo diesel.
Okay. Nice.
And yeah, and sometime after everybody fell asleep and I'm laying there trying to go to sleep, I hear a whoop off in the distance.
Mm.
And it doesn't sound close. It sounds way far away. And then, so okay, so now I'm getting nervous. And as I'm trying to fall asleep, at one point, Bo, right on the side of the tent where all our heads are at, I hear this deep growl.
Oh no.
Deep growl. And I sit up quickly. And I reach over and I tap my wife and I hand her the 357 and she goes, "What are you doing?" I mean, my heart was about to pop out of my throat. She goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I just heard a growl on the outside of this tent." She's like, "No, you didn't. Go back to sleep." She didn't even take the gun, rolled over and went back to sleep. I'm sitting up. My heart is pounding, but I didn't hear any kind of movement out there or footsteps. It was just that deep growl that I'd heard.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So if I end up finally, I had to go relieve myself. So I ended up having to go out there and check anyway. There was nothing out there. Took care of my business, went and laid back down, and I could not fall asleep because I didn't want whatever it was to come back. And that's the other thing too. I don't know if what I heard was supernatural or if it was an animal, but if it was an animal, it was very quiet because I didn't hear footsteps of any kind. You know?
Yeah, and either way, that's a freaky incident. You didn't hear anything coming to the tent or leave the tent, right?
No, I didn't hear any movement, just that deep growl.
Mm.
And I mean, I sat up. And after that, I couldn't fall asleep. And I ended up hearing another whoop, this time from the other direction. And it was also far away. And there's no way I could fall asleep. When I finally got about an hour and a half sleep was when I saw the sky had started to just now turn blue. The sun was coming up.
Yeah.
At that point, I couldn't take it. I ended up sleeping about an hour and a half. Then we got up and loaded up, packed everything up. From there, we went and had breakfast, and then from there we drove to Albuquerque, and then went back up north to Farmington. That's the very second day is when we crossed that demonic dude. And then after that happened, that's when we went to that Aztec, New Mexico that I told you it's a national park, it's ruins.
Yeah.
And then once we left there, we went to Durango, Colorado, and that is so beautiful. And we stayed at a hotel there. And then from there, we went to Mesa Verde. That's where all them Pueblo Indian, Hopi Indian dwellings are carved into the side of a cliff.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
Oh, keep in mind, a guy went missing there, and they didn't find him till years later, his bones. And that's the one that people had said he'd been. They were walking the trail and would hear a man calling for help. No one ever found him. Not the witnesses, not the park rangers. But it was at that national park. But at the time we visited in July of 2014, I didn't even know about that missing guy.
Right.
And he was from Texas also. It's a real famous case if you look it up.
It sounds like you took a paranormal road trip and didn't even mean to, man.
Yeah. You know what's funny? You mentioned that because that was never the intent. But yes, a lot of the stuff we did, that's what happened. Okay, so after we left Mesa Verde, we continued in Colorado, right? And this is where our little second incident happened. We ended up in a little town called Bayfield, Colorado.
Okay.
Not to be confused with Bailey, Colorado, where the Bigfoot Museum's at. This one's still in kind of southwest Colorado, and it's called Bay Field. It's near Pagosa Springs. Well, we ended up staying at a lake. It's a reservoir, and it was called Lake Venecita or Vallecito, something like that. You could look it up, near Bayfield, Colorado. That was a beautiful park. Oh, it's in the San Juan National Forest.
Oh, wow.
Which is funny because Wes just had someone on either the last show or the one before where those guys were hunting in the San Juan National Forest, which this story I'm telling you happened in the San Juan National Forest.
All right.
So it was beautiful. It's a lake, and I'm talking trees. It was really nice. And that night, here we go again. And this time I heard footsteps. I heard movement. Now, that could have been a bear, that could have been a raccoon, who knows? So I'm sitting up with the shotgun, and since I'm on the left side, of course the barrel's pointed to the left away from the family.
Right.
And now I'm listening. I'm trying to hear what's going on out here. And at this point, my wife wakes up. Now, this time I knew better than to wake her up because it was obvious she didn't care. She goes, "What are you doing?" And I whisper to her, "I heard footsteps." Tell her I heard footsteps out there. She's like, "Lay down before you end up accidentally shooting somebody." Of course, that pissed me off because how am I going to accidentally shoot somebody if the barrel's pointed to the left and I'm at the far left?
Right.
Anyway, that was it. Nothing else happened. I unzipped the tent, peeked out. I didn't see anything. Zip it up, lay back down. Sometime right before the sun came up, a storm hit and it started raining. Well, my wife's side of the tent had got flooded, and she eventually couldn't take it anymore and got up and went and tried to finish sleeping in the truck. Well, she was wet and uncomfortable, and so she woke everybody up early at the crack of dawn. We started packing everything up and loading up to leave. And she told me that in the middle of the night, she was awakened by what sounded like like a pack of wild dogs barking. And she said that the sound changed and it sounded like monkeys chattering, or like you would see at a monkey or a chimp enclosure at the zoo.
No.
She said that, yeah, she said the dog barking, it transformed, the sound ended up being like a bunch of monkeys chattering.
Mm.
And she said that she sat up, looked at me, and I was out cold. So while we're packing and we're about to leave, she's telling me this story, right? Now, you remember 2 nights before I'd heard the growl and she didn't believe me, right?
Yeah.
So now she heard this. And so I told her, I said, "Yeah, right. That didn't happen. You were probably dreaming." And basically, it's not that I didn't believe her, but since she hadn't believed me, I was going to make her think I didn't believe her.
Right. Oh, you missed out on a Bigfoot out of spite, man.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're driving out of there, right? She had her iPad with her as we're leaving the camp. She couldn't let it go. She especially didn't like the fact that I didn't believe her, right? So she went on to the BFRO website and started looking up that area right there where we were at that lake, Vallecito or Venecita, something like that.
All right.
She started looking it up, and she ended up finding a BFRO encounter that was documented there.
Wow.
And what it was 3 ex-military guys. 2 of them were cops. They're 3 friends. And they would go up there hunting every year. And it was there at the San Juan National Forest. They mentioned that lake specifically. And they'd go hunting up there in the mountains. And they would do primitive camping.
Right.
Off in the middle of nowhere, yeah. And so one night they ended up getting surrounded by these sounds, which your listeners can look up the deal in case I'm not telling it right. They basically got surrounded by a bunch of Bigfoots. And so two of the guys packed up the camp while the third guy kept armed guard over them while they loaded up. So they packed everything up, got in their truck, and they took off. Their camp basically got surrounded by these things.
Wow.
Well, as they got further down the road, when they thought they were at a safe distance, they did something that I wouldn't have done, but they decide to stop the vehicle and then get out and unload the weapons to make them safe, is what they said.
Right.
While they were stopped in the road, after they thought they'd gotten a far enough away distance, they start hearing them coming up behind them on the road.
Nuh-uh.
Oh yeah, caught up to them. So of course they all jump in the truck and take off again. And we ended up stopping to eat in Pagosa Springs. And of course she found that and had to make it a point to show it to me since I believed her. So there had been one already documented there at that lake reservoir.
Wow.
And I'll tell you another interesting thing too is at one point when we're leaving there and we're driving on the highway, I saw a sign that said something like Devil Mountain Road.
Right.
And then later, while checking the map, there was actually a Devil Mountain right there near Pagosa Springs.
Now, I wonder where
And
they
it-
would get that name from.
Yeah, exactly. And that mountain is in the San Juan National Forest.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like it's got a long historical record of something going on.
Yeah, and if you remember that the river where we saw the possessed guy in New Mexico, that's the San Juan River.
It was,
And this was the San Juan National Forest in Colorado.
Mm.
Yeah. There was I told you we had our deer lease over there in Brownwood, right?
Yeah.
Well, there was a documented sighting just west of Robert Lee, Texas, in a place called Silver, Texas. So one time we were coming back from the deer lease, and this was in the middle of the afternoon on a weekend, like a Sunday afternoon. And I knew that sighting had been there in Silver. So we took a detour just to go check it out where the sighting happened. And what it was, those two guys had been night fishing. There's a bridge that runs across there. And there's a river that comes through there. And while they were night fishing, they had intended to camp out there. Something threw a rock at them, splashed the water, and after that, it did a bluff charge at them coming across the river towards them. Well, they ended up packing up, decided they weren't going to stay the night. They didn't know what it was. But when they got back to their truck, which was up on the side of the road near the bridge, they thought the truck was covered in mud, like the whole thing was covered in mud. Right?
Yeah.
Was that as they go to get in it to leave, they find out that wasn't mud. The truck was covered in feces.
What?
Yes. So you tell me that's not ape-like behavior.
Yeah, really.
And he said that on the way home, they ran into a big bad storm, and the storm ended up washing it off. By the time he got home, it had rained so hard it washed it all off. But he said when they first walked up and saw it, they thought, who covered the truck in mud? Because they thought it was mud. But of course, when they go to touch it and get near it, then they smelled it. It wasn't mud. It was crap.
Oh, well, man.
So we take this detour and we stop right there on that bridge, right? And you check out the river, and it was real quiet. And it was, you can ask my wife, it was a real quiet, like no sound whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it was creepy in the daytime. I can't imagine what it would be like at night.
Oh, yeah, man.
And if you look over on the west side of the bridge, there was some type of telephone wires or something going across over the river, and there was these giant buzzards up on the pole, and these were freaking huge buzzards, man. I'm talking, they looked like they were at least 2.5 feet tall.
Really? Those are
Big
monsters.
old, big old fat buzzards.
Yeah.
And this is the creepy thing. They were all sitting on that wire, and they were all facing towards the bridge,
Mm.
the highway, towards the highway.
Yeah.
It was the creepiest thing. I mean, it was just, we had a loaded AR in our vehicle,
All right.
not to mention our deer rifles. And it was just so creepy in the daytime. And we discussed that. We thought, well, if it's that creepy in the broad daylight, can you imagine this place at night?
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, that was pretty messed up. I got to tell you something funny. Back in May of 2019, we went down to Houston, and we got to meet Wes Germer, Tony Merkel, the Hillbilly Horror Story,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and Bob Gimlin.
Sweet.
And it was me and my wife and my two boys. We ended up sitting at the same table with Wes Germer and Bob Gimlin. And I had met Bob Gimlin one time before, the previous October. He came over here to the Texas Bigfoot Conference. And so I had already met him once. That was my second time to meet him. But I had all these things I was going to talk to Wes about. Like I told you, I didn't get to tell him about the caller I'd heard on the same highway as my guys from coast to coast.
All right.
I was going to tell him about that. I was going to tell him everything I've told you, and here's my chance to ask him questions or test out theories, whatever,
All right.
Well, that ended up not happening. I guess I kind of became a fanboy and forgot everything I was going to say. So all I did was end up telling Wes a stupid joke. My boys hate it when I tell this joke.
Well, let's hear it.
All right, well, they're black belts in Kung Fu. So what I tell my joke, I always say, my parents couldn't afford for me and my two brothers to take martial arts. So all we learned was Mexican judo. You don't know if I got a gun, or you don't know if I got a knife. And Wes smiled and he goes, nice. And my wife and daughter still make fun of that today, to this day. You got Wes Germer, and all you can think of is one stupid joke. He just goes, nice. that was it. Oh, you know who else was there? Russell Accord from Expedition Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is, that was in May, and the first season of that didn't debut till a month later in June.
Wow.
So at the time I met him, he was there because he always travels with Bob Gimlin wherever he goes.
Yep.
But I didn't know who Russell Accord was at the time. None of us did. Or I say none of us, I mean my family. But yeah, I got to meet him too. He's nice, but he's very serious.
Is he?
Yeah, he's one of those guys. He's not going to be joking around with you. You could tell he means business.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, he was friendly enough. But he was a serious dude.
Yeah, I was on Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes, and I think I kind of fanboyed for a minute too, man. It's it was my first big interview, for me to be on somebody else's show,
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I can't mess this up, But yeah, I was a little bit of a nervous wreck, and I kept telling my wife, I don't understand, of all the things I've done and seen in my life, why was I so scared to come onto a podcast? But it is nerve wracking, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. When you say all the stuff you've done and everything you've been through in your life, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, we shouldn't be afraid of anything at this point.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, I'll tell you one last funny story from that trip we took.
Yeah.
We tried to camp at the Redwood National Forest, but all those spots were taken up. And they said you got to reserve those a year ahead of time.
Wow.
So we ended up staying at a private campground on the Klamath River right before it empties out into the Pacific Ocean. And that private campground we stayed at belonged to the Yurok tribe of California. And it was a real nice campground. Most of the people were up near the highway, right?
Right.
But there wasn't a lot of trees over there close to the highway. We found this one area closer to the river that had beautiful tree cover and grass. And we thought, man, we got the prime spot right here. So we set up our tent, right? We go in there. By this point, my wife had started giving me Benadryl to knock me out at night because she was tired of me hearing every little noise and sitting up and disturbing her sleep. So
Right.
she gave me Benadryl. I was out cold. Well, sometime during the middle of the night, we heard a metal clanging sound. And then she woke me up. She goes, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Yeah, I did." She goes, "What was it?" I said, "It sounded like someone slammed the lid down on the dumpster." And she goes, "Oh, okay." So next morning, sun comes up. I get out there. I start the fire. I'm going to make breakfast. Her and the kids go exploring towards the beach. She goes, "I'm going to go look for that dumpster you were talking about." Okay. Well, she came back later and she said, "Well, there was no dumpster over there, but here's what we did find." And then she showed me, and there was bear tracks. There was a set of huge ones, and then there was a set of little ones next to it.
Wow.
And her and the kids took pictures of their feet next to those bear claws, bear prints. And so at that point, I go look around the other side of our truck, and we had one of those. We had a full size barbecue that we took,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had one of those little bubble looking round ones that you use at tailgating.
Right.
Well, that little one was laying off in the grass on the other side of the truck.
Oh, you had a visitor.
Yeah, we had a visitor. The one time I finally got some rest, we had a visitor show up. And then the guy comes over there and he's laughing. He's the caretaker. He's the custodian of the property.
Right.
Well, he's married to the lady that runs it. And he's laughing. And he said, "Did y'all have any visitors?" And we're like, "Yes, sir. How'd you know?" He goes, he's laughing, literally laughing at us. And then he goes, "Didn't you see the sign?" And we said, "What sign?" And he pointed at it. Well, it was a faded wooden sign, and it was kind of hidden in some brush there. And what the sign said was Bear Lane.
Oh, wow.
That's why nobody else was camping on the pretty spot.
Oh.
We thought we'd hit the primo location and got lucky. No. We put our tent right in the middle of Bear Lane.
Oh my goodness.
And then he laughed and he goes, "That's all right." He said, "They weren't going to mess with you." He said, "They were just curious." He said, "What happens is these fishermen come over here and they hang their salmon up because they're going to continue fishing.
Yeah.
And these bears come over there and they eat all the salmon they want." And he said, "So those bears are not interested in you or your food. They're just curious."
Yep.
Of course, we never slept in the same place twice, so we didn't stick around there either. But man, we still got those pictures and stuff, and we did have a visitor. And I slept like a baby.
Of all nights.
Of all nights. Now, we still had our weapons in there, but I slept good. But by the time she started giving me Benadryl, it was towards the end of the vacation. It ended up being 6,012 miles round trip from our driveway back to our driveway.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, we crossed the Continental Divide 7 times before we finally quit getting out and getting a picture with the sign. Because you crisscross it when you're traveling on all those states up there. You crisscross that Continental Divide more than once, back and forth.
Man, I would love to take a trip like that. You know, my wife and I, when my daughter, she lived in Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
and here we're in West Virginia. It was about 1,000 miles each direction.
Yeah.
But most of the time when we took those trips, it was just like a turn and burn. You know, we'd drive 15, 16 hours, get down there and
Right.
head back about 8 more hours before we'd stop and get a hotel, sleep 6 hours, jump back up and get back to the house.
Right.
But I love a good road trip, and I would enjoy being able to just pace yourself like you're talking about doing 3 weeks, and just seeing the sights. And
Man, and there was so much we didn't get to see.
oh yeah, man.
But we got to see a lot. We saw the Grand Tetons. We were at Yellowstone. We saw Old Faithful. We saw the waterfalls my wife wanted to see. We were at Rocky Mountain National Park. Oh, Crater Lake was beautiful in Oregon. Wow, it was, yeah. The only other incident we had, I think it was Breckenridge, Colorado. I'd have to look it up to tell you for sure, but it was one of them famous ski towns.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed at a private campground there, and we'd heard voices down below our camp. It sounded like a family was down there. So I figured that the campground kind of looped around back down below, and there was more campgrounds down there, right? Well, while I was cooking, my wife and the kids went exploring, and she said there wasn't any campgrounds down there. It was all woods.
Really?
Yeah. So these voices that we heard that sounded like a family, I don't know what that was.
Wow.
But there wasn't any families down there. It was just woods.
Wow, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah, it kind of was. But we learned a few things. We had overpacked on the trip, too much luggage.
You know what? That happens every time. No, it don't matter, Pete, if you're going camping overnight or for, an extended trip. I think somebody with a preparedness mindset, like I'm sure you have,
right?
You got to, cross your T's and dot your I's. And we wind up overdoing it, man.
Yeah. The other thing we learned, which I guess I should have known this, but there's laundry facilities at most hotels or motels you stay at. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
So we overpacked. You didn't need that much clothes. You could do laundry on the nights we were at the hotel.
Yep.
But the other thing too was you remember that night I told you that it got soaked in Bayfield, Colorado, when the tent got soaked and stuff?
Yeah.
So we ended up driving all the way over the peak at Rocky Mountain National Park, because you have the West Park and the East Park. The East Park has more trees, so that one was sold out. So we stayed on the west side. And the west side wasn't as popular because they'd had a big fire and a lot of the trees had burned down. So what we did is we ended up driving over that 11,000 feet up in the air to the other side of that Rocky Mountain National Park. And on the east side, the little town is Estes Park, Colorado. Well, I didn't find out 2 years later that's where that Stanley Hotel is from The Shining.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about that either.
I didn't know it was there because we didn't even swing. We were in Estes Park and didn't know that was there, so we would have swung by there. But anyway, the reason we had gone is to buy a bunch of that spray that you use to waterproof your tent.
Mm-hmm.
I found this little store that had them. I bought out all 6 cans. And I ended up using all 6 cans on our tent.
Yeah.
And guess what I found out? It doesn't work.
Was oh yeah, was it made for tents? Because I think I know what kind of stuff you're talking about too.
I'm not sure if it was made for tents. They told me it was, but it didn't waterproof anything. The water still came through. Let me tell you what I found out on this trip that does work, and it's worked every single time since.
What's that?
We bought 2 tarps.
Yep.
We put one under the tent, and then we put the other one over the tent. And then you can either stake that one down or use rocks or logs to hold it in place, so wind won't blow it off.
Yep.
After that, it would pour rain, and we stayed dry. The tent was dry. We were all dry.
Oh yeah.
That ended up working.
Yeah.
But it was trial and error. I wish we'd have known that before we left. We would have brought we brought everything else but the kitchen sink.
Oh. Pete,
Yeah.
it's been a good series of shows, I believe, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. I've told you all our ghost stories that I could remember.
Hey, I enjoyed every minute of it. You know, you made me laugh. You made me literally cry. I've come to know you. You know what I mean? And I just that's the part I take away the most, man. I thank God for getting to know you, Pete.
Yes, sir. I'm really glad I got to know you too, and you're such a good person and a blessing, and you're a good guy. I've said this before. You're a genuine person. And you know what? That means a lot to me.
Yeah.
You could run into fake people all the time, but a genuine person is. Oh, speaking of genuine people, I got to tell you this too while I'm still on here.
Yeah.
I heard your interview with Dark Waters.
Yes.
And I've heard tons of interviews with Dark Waters. And I have 2 things I could tell you about that. Number one, he seems like he's changed a lot as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he first started out, I used to play him at night when we'd fall asleep. I told you my wife works nights. She's a nurse.
Right.
And I would let the boys sleep in the bed with me when she wasn't there. And so I would put that on for them. And they were way younger then. And I think they were still in elementary. And they used to like to listen to him because he cussed a lot when he told his stories, and they thought that was funny. And so I've heard a bunch of different interviews with him, but I got to tell you, this was the best Dark Waters interview I've ever heard. Was the one with you.
Wow. Thank you.
It really was. I enjoyed the stuff y'all talked about. It really resonated with me, and I've heard a lot of interviews. He's been on a lot of shows.
Yeah,
And I've heard him on his own show, and this one with you is, man, I would rate this one number 1.
Pete, thank you so much, man. You know, to God be the glory on that one, because
yes, sir.
We really went deep on some stuff, you know, and I know we got into some areas that some people wouldn't even want to talk about, but I feel like it was a genuine, like to use your word, it was a genuine conversation from him. He stuck with me after that too, Pete. Like, we've exchanged phone numbers, we've texted each other. You know, he is authentic. You know, it was a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed. Y'all did go deep, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I enjoyed the topics, and I feel that everything that you both said was sincere. And my wife and kids ended up listening to it on a road trip, and they really enjoyed it too.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everything, Bo. God bless you, and I love you, man.
Hey, I love you too, Pete. God bless you, and thank you for everything, brother. If you need anything, holler at me. If you're coming up the east side of the U.S., let me know. And next time I head down south, because I do plan on coming to Texas